Geek Out! Hey, welcome to a special episode of Geek Out. Right before San Diego Comic-Con, we recorded an interview with John Layman. Me and him had kind of hung out at AwesomeCon in D.C., and we brought up the possibility of doing like a post-game for Chew, which he has never done before. And, you know, by the time this thing airs, it'll be about 9 months, almost to the day that Chew's ended. And, you know, it really is one of the comics that led the Image Renaissance, certainly a book that we all enjoy. It gave us Poyo. Just had to recompose there. So, you know, we wanted John to come on and kind of go from beginning to end, talk about his series, and, you know, look back fondly on it. And, you know, thanks to John for coming on and doing this, and yeah, here it is. And coming back on the show, we have John Layman. He's here to promote Chew, which has been done since November of last year, but it's a bit of a post-game. I got to hang out with John a bit at AwesomeCon last month, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze, and just the idea. John, is this the first time you've done a post-game for Chew?
Yeah, it sure is.
So
yeah, I think it's a neat idea. I'm kind of surprised no one has talked.
It's that silver tongue of Sam's.
That's right. Yeah. Just get a couple ciders in me, and I'm good to go. But
we did have night. That is for sure.
We did. Did you? I mean, now before we dive into it, I mean, now that AwesomeCon's done, how did you find the show in the Washington D.C. area in general?
Oh, you know, I had a good time at Washington D.C. I brought the wife and kid, and you know, when I bring them, though my wife will spend more money than I make, so it's not like a show where I make money. And that being said, it was a little bit of a celebrity show anyways. But, you know, everyone was nice. It was an area I've never been. So, you know, it was fun. You know, I like shows.
You got to meet Stanley.
I don't need to make a ton of money to have fun.
Sure.
So sometimes, you know, just a good time with friends and being able to take the kid to museums and stuff made it worthwhile.
Was that the first time in all the shows that you've done where you actually met Stan Lee?
Well, meet is an overstatement because I did a photo op where he kind of stared dead-eyed for 3 seconds, and they, you know, herded us in like cattle. I've actually been on an elevator with him before. You know, I've you know, our paths have crossed before, but I really kind of thought, you know, Stan's 95. You know, there's people don't live forever. And, you know, like I said, I had my kid with me, so he knows him from the movies. So I thought it would be kind of a treat to get a picture with Stan. But we didn't actually meet him.
Fair. That's a fair point. I mean,
in that regard, I've met Adam West and Burt Ward.
That's all right, because they were at last year's show.
Yeah.
And what a difference a year can make. Anywho, so I guess let's start off with the big one. This is Chew is something that you had kind of thought up for a while, but I mean, it's pretty out there. Where did the idea of this world of food powered culinary, you know, how did that all kind of?
In some ways, that's the worst question because I don't have a good answer. I don't. After all these years, there's no good story. You know, I had my idea about the cannibal cop. I had my idea about the girl who, you know, could write about things you could taste. You know, I had my Saturday Night Live sketch about chickens being illegal and people selling eggs on the corner. And they were all kind of like goofy things that couldn't sustain a book. I realized there was this connective tissue of food. And once I kind of put all these different ideas together and realized, hey, they're all food, suddenly it became this very kind of rich tapestry, and it just kind of rolled from there. But it was a really long kind of process of these ideas that I'd been holding on for a while, and they just kind of came together as one.
With, I mean, there is just this undercurrent of humor that really, I think, sets Chew this really offbeat kind of. It's almost like you can see it with a lot of alternative comics in the 80s. You kind of see it with cartoons like Ren and Stimpy and Rocko's Modern Life, the cartoons that were ostensibly made for kids but weren't really made for kids. Was that something that was always kind of an inspiration, or something that was always there too?
Well, you know, it was all quirky and funny, but I think getting Rob Guillory, like it started getting weirder and weirder because the art kind of matched, and I could go, you read those first couple issues and they're pretty dark. He's eating off a serial killer's face, and it's real black humor, and I think kind of to keep myself from getting too bored and it getting too dark, it just started getting more and more outrageous, and I don't know. It kept us entertained as creators. It kept us. It gave us the ability to tell a lot of different kind of stories rather than just he's going to catch this cannibal or this mass murderer, and it kept it from becoming too dark. Even as the character stuff became dark, the story stayed very light.
I mean, by the end of it, like,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, being a post game, we can dive into spoilers quite a bit. By the end of it, there's not a lot of people left standing.
No, and it's I guess I consider it sort of housed in a comedy. I mean, the character and sort of the fate of all the casts. It's really sad, but at the same time we kind of keep it light and keep it fun, and I just think it kept it from becoming too oppressively dark.
With all was the background gags mostly, was it kind of a 50-50 split between you and Rob, or was that something like?
Oh, I'd say more like 85-15. That was mostly Rob, and sometimes I wouldn't even notice them because I was lettering off low res files, and I wouldn't really, the comic books come together when they're finally ready. They come together at a furious pace, and we're just trying to upload files to the printer and get it done. And I wouldn't see some of these jokes. Mostly Rob just kind of being bored and being silly after being in a studio for 12 hours and getting loopy.
I do have to wonder, on the more legal side, you've got straight up screen caps from stuff like Mary Poppins, Lethal Weapon 2.
Yes.
So many photoshopped images of Robert Kirkman in various compromising poses.
Yeah. I don't think Kirkman's going to sue us. The other people could. We're small enough to attract that much attention, and Rob, it's real subtle. It would be one thing if they were watching Mary Poppins on 72-inch screen TVs, and that took, if we were making money off that, but they're background gags, and they're kind of, they're really in the background. So so far no lawyers have noticed, and it's kind of too late now.
It'll exist.
And Kirkman noticed, but what's Kirkman gonna do other than bust my chops?
Do you have a particular favorite of all the 60 issues? 64 if you count the revival one shot and the Poyo specials. Do you have a particular background favorite
of the jokes?
Oh yeah,
or the story? No, they all over a 1,000 couple pages, they all kind of blend in, and I know that was always more Rob's domain than mine. So I have things that I still think are funny, but that's me myself. But yeah, I couldn't pick a favorite.
Now, Rob hadn't really done major comics work before Chew. What made him the perfect?
No.
What made him the perfect artist for all this?
Well, I wanted someone light, so it wouldn't get too dark and inaccessible. And really, I just hit the lotto. I won big because I found this kid who just wants to work. And, that's pretty rare in comics. There's a lot of artists that are crazy or slow, or they go MIA, or they have drama. And Rob just wanted to put his nose to the grindstone and draw a page a day. I mean, I found a workaholic, and he only got better and better. And anything I threw at him, he could do. And a challenge of what crazy thing am I gonna ask him to draw, and how is he gonna surprise me?
And you had pitched basically, in the liner notes for the 12th and final volume, you basically knew where all 60 issues were going to go. You had pitched it to him at a San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah, it was always, sort of this sort of circuitous, it's a first contact story. It was always going to be about events leading up to, mankind's first contact with aliens. And, I knew that would be the ending. And, I knew with the chicken band that they would be, chicken aliens. So yeah, I knew 60. I knew, I had a lot of the skeleton there, but sort of, enough leeway that I could, have fun with this or that character, in issues, as long as I got to point A. There was still room for discovery, even as I was getting from point A to point B to point C.
Mm-hmm. What would you? First off, I feel like a lot of like the really good, Chew included, not to brown nose more than I usually do, like titles like Preacher, like Scalped. What is it about like 60 issues that just lends itself so well for like a full-on creator-owned story?
I don't, it feels like a novel without getting too kind of, full of itself and going in too many kind of directions where it gets, I don't know, self-indulgent. I mean, I like Sandman, but I do feel like at 75 issues, it got a little pretentious and self-indulgent. I think if you keep it to 60, in a monthly world, that's 5 years. We didn't quite hit that because we were arcs, but it feels the length of a good, meaty, solid novel.
It was pretty immaculately paced. I mean, what would you say were some of the big? You were mentioning you left enough room for growth. What were some of the big surprise? Like, did you anticipate like Chogs getting their own merchandising? Did you anticipate Poyo getting?
God no. Poyo and Chogs both ran away with things. Like Poyo was just supposed to be this kind of MacGuffin, and then he kept returning, and then we started getting more outrageous, and people just kind of loved him. Joke that everyone was in on, where we'd shake our fist in the air and be like Poyo, and everyone else was like that too. He really took a bigger part, and then he sort of he was this super chicken, and it was never the plan originally to have Tony face the vampire collector after eating Poyo, but to me the Poyo joke had run its course, and it's like, well, it's time to get rid of this character anyways, to make room for the stuff that matters. And Tony eats things and absorbs his abilities. It works out perfectly. It almost seemed obvious and planned, although it wasn't.
I do have to point, like, those Poyo interludes, I feel like they're very like stray bullets, right? With the every now and again it's like, oh, what's Poyo up to?
Oh yeah, they were always kind of like Amy Race Car.
Oh yeah.
Stories and stray bullets. They existed in their own kind of kooky world that wasn't necessarily in continuity and didn't really follow the real rules of the rest of the book. So for Rob and I, it was just kind of an excuse to go nuts and come up with crazy funny stuff that crazier than was in the rest of the book.
If there was ever a Poyo interlude I'd want to see like expanded into a full one shot, it would probably, being a big kaiju kid, that one where he takes on the kaiju is perhaps one of my favorites.
Oh yeah. Mecha Turducken.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one, because Mecha Godzilla was always like, watching like in the early days of cable, watching those shitty like. What shitty? Why am I have to slap myself.
How dare you?
Watching those kaiju films and like on the early days of cable, like Mecha Godzilla was far and away and it's just such a genius idea. It's Godzilla, but he's a robot.
Yeah.
So seeing Poyo take on the Mecha Turducken, I was just like, I need this in my life.
Yeah, no, I love those villains, and to me, I would love a Poyo side scroller, and all of those Poyo double page spreads are boss levels. They're the boss fights at the end of each level.
There's got to be some indie developer out there listening to this that's like, I can do that.
Here we go.
Yeah, give me that 8.
Yeah,
give me that. Yeah, give me that 8-bit Poyo. Though this is there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
well, no, go ahead.
If I knew how to do it, I would. We'd make a game in a heartbeat.
Of all the merchandising, I mean, what would you say was the Poyo plush or the Chogs? I mean, I feel like merchandising in comics, unless you're like The Walking Dead, is like just so rare outside of the big two. I mean, that the entire idea that you guys got to do the vinyl figures and everything must have been so cool.
Oh yeah, I mean that they're hooking up with Skeleton Crew was really one of the kind of the proudest moments of Chew, and it helps that they're kind of a mom and pop operation operating in their own kind of tiny studio in Maine, so that that it's not like Walking Dead, Toys R Us and Target and stuff, and that's fine for a book Chew's size because the audience is very passionate and would buy the stuff, but I'm looking at my shelf and there's these, mini chogs and, there's got to be like 15 or 20 of them. I mean, we've done a bunch of plushes, a lot of vinyls, a couple statues. Like, it's just unbelievable to me to have this bookcase with several things of my stuff, brought to life. It's amazing.
To take it back to the book itself, what made Image the right publisher for Chew?
They accepted it. It's funny because I originally pitched it to Vertigo over and over and over, and at the time, it was, I thought it would be kind of a darker book, and I was friends. I've got friends in the industry from various companies, and it was kind of an open joke that I was pitching this book that no one wanted, and I never actually pitched Image because they were kind of like my last resort. And then I got a job because comics were kind of failing, and but it was like a long-term temp job at a video game company. I'd worked there for about. I knew I wanted to get back into comics, so I called Eric Stevenson and said, "Hey, I've got a job. I'm making money. I'm going to publish this book that nobody wants. It's about, it's a bird flu cannibal comedy, blah, blah, blah. I've got money. I'm looking for an artist. Can you point me in the right direction?" And he said, "No, but I like the idea. Find the right artist and we'll do it." So without pitch it to Image, Stevenson accepted it. So it was pretty amazing. So then I was able to, find an artist and basically say, "Hey, Image is the bad cop. If they don't want you, I'm going to cut you loose until I find an artist that, Image wants." But, once again, Rob hit a home run out of the gate again and again and again.
With the before this, you had kind of alluded to working in comics. You were an editor at Wildstorm, like years and during the crazy times, the dark times.
Well, no, I guess it depends on your definition of crazy. It was the end of the boom where people weren't buying cars based on sales of this or that issue of DV8 or Wetworks, but they could remember those days, and they were still laying down credit cards on company cards on Fridays, and the whole studio getting drunk. And I remember they canceled a book one time. The vice president called us in and said, that sucking, we're selling this book, or we're canceling this book because it's down to 40,000 copies.
Jeez.
And of course, now most comics would kill for that,
including big.
But yeah, I edited for about 5. What's that?
Including big 2 books these days.
Oh God, yeah. I worked at Wildstorm for about 5 years, and about halfway through it, DC bought it, and it became a lot less freewheeling and a lot more bureaucratic. And I always knew I wanted to write, so I took after about 5 years and getting tired of working for the DC bureaucracy, I made the jump to freelance. And you start back at the bottom. And I think my first books were for Avatar at $100 a script for a Species miniseries that never saw the light of day. But each gig you hoped would do a little better. It's like climbing stairs, and each one would. You'd hope you'd make more money. You'd hope you'd get a higher profile. You'd hope each thing would get better. And eventually, I got a Gambit gig at Marvel after doing a few short stories at Marvel. I did this and that, and then like everything, I had a couple bad years where comics weren't doing so well. We just had a baby. My wife worked in newspapers, which were dying, and And somehow I was getting video game work that was coming very easily and paying like 10 times more than a comic for work. I couldn't get low paying comic book work, but I was getting all this high paying video game work because I wrote comics and comics were cool. And so I just kind of ran with that for a while. I was like, hey, I'm making money for the first time in my life. Why am I banging my head against the wall and, getting paid table scraps to work in comics? But I love comics and always wanted to come back. So I eventually took a video game staff job knowing that I would need to finance a comic that, I didn't think would do well, but I'd do it as an here's where I've been, here's this book called Chew that didn't sell, but maybe it's, hopefully it's like a cult hit, and then I could use it to get other work. And then, surprise of surprise, it just took off.
How had your time, working as an editor kind of informed your own writing?
I'm a really good self-editor. I can look at my stuff. I think people could, totally say I'm full of shit, but I can. If a script feels right, I move on. But if there's some, little niggling doubt in the back of my head, I just work through it until I get it right. And I'm really good at sort of, I guess, kind of nailing down what's missing from a script. Sort of anticipating editors, the editor's notes, because I used to do that myself.
Yeah. So in terms of like, I suppose that also makes it kind of a little less nitpicky when it comes to, having seen like the editors that are like, this character wouldn't do that, or this character wouldn't do that. Having worked on both sides, you kind of let Rob, I suppose, breathe a little more, and your own writing breathe a little more.
Yeah. I mean, I worked on this one book with I mean, there are some people who try to take too much control. They'd be like, this is an exaggeration, but almost like, I got the art pages back. This guy was very creative. I always kind of as left-handed, because that side of his brain. Maybe he's wearing his watch on his other arm. Can you have the artist redraw it? And no, you have to step back and say, okay, maybe there's some logic to that, but it's not going to influence the not a single reader is going to care, and all you're going to do is piss off the artist, and you basically there's a give and take to stuff. Once in a while Rob would draw something completely like, or it wasn't completely what I wanted, and not just Rob, anybody, but you have to step back and like, is this really going to affect the reader's experience? Does it influence the story? Or is it just something that looks different than what you imagined in your head? And really, the valuable lesson is, if it doesn't matter, if it doesn't affect story clarity, step back and let the artist shine. Otherwise, you're just shackling them.
I think
and they're gonna be unhappy.
Well, I remember the last time you were on, I think you kind of relayed this anecdote that like earlier in the series, Rob had drawn a sequence of like Olive like sucking her thumb. And you were like, "Whoa!"
Oh yeah, that was probably going on right there. Well, okay, here's a new story. I didn't really like the last page of Chew. Like Rob drew exactly what I asked him on the script, but it wasn't what was in my head. And there was a point where I talked it out with Rob. It's like, well, I sort of saw it that way, this way in my head, and Rob drew it sort of much more abrupt. But then I also stepped back, and it's like. And part of it's like, well, this is my book. This is my baby, and it's the last page. This matters. But it's also Rob's book. And it's what was in his head, and he was exactly on the script. So I told him my concerns. We talked it out. Ultimately, I let it go. And there's this thing where everything seems like a big deal, and once it gets printed and a couple months pass, it doesn't really matter.
Speaking of that last page, again, this is a post-game, spoilers and all that. I feel like that final splash is really just because Tony Chu is really, I feel like, certainly for the first, you could argue the entire series, he's almost like he feels like the world's scapegoat. He can't catch a break at work. Appleby hates his fucking guts. He's forced to eat, like, necrotized tissue on the reg. He and at the very end, when the aliens finally touch down, he's like, you know what? It was all leading to chicken men. Fuck these guys. Like, there's just that moment where he just snapped.
The other part is he lost everyone. And he's been stewing on that for, he was always this guy who followed the rules, and look what it got him. He lost everyone he cared, everyone who mattered to him. His best friend and his true love, if you want to get, Olive clearly mattered to him, but, he lost his wife and his partner. And, he was just enraged about that for, a quarter decade or a quarter century or however long it was.
There is kind of there was that fake out that I didn't see coming, where you had previously teased the death of Amelia, and then in the penultimate arc, we think that Amelia is almost killed by Egg. We think she's presumably that's it. She's fine. But then the next arc, you're just like, oh, and yeah, now Tony's a widower again, and it was just, for me, that was one of the more heartbreaking, because in a way I kind of figured Colby would always kind of lose himself to his vices, but Amelia was just trying to do the right thing, and it ended up costing her life, and that was such a heartbreaker right there.
It was a sort of a shitty thing on my part to do this fake out and then have it be a double fake out. Like, oh, she's dead. No, she's not dead. Yeah, she's dead. It was a crummy thing to do, but I don't regret it. And yeah, you're right. I wanted every character who died. I tried to give them a moment and give them a good death. I would say, except for D-Bear, and I did that because I thought it was funny to have one guy, and let it be him because he kind of deserves it.
With the,
but it was important to me, every character, I tried to give them, a moment and make their death, matter in some way.
Did you see Tony's sister? I guess also Tony. Did you see her role? Were you kind of surprised how much her role grew over the course of the series from your initial thoughts?
No. She was always going to be as important as she was. She I made her as lovable as possible, so it would really hurt. My problem was I actually fell in love with her, and she and Colby were my favorite characters to write, and boy, that issue 30, like it made my wife cry. Like, it still chokes me up because I like that character so much. But she was always kind of I don't know, in some ways the heart and soul of the series. Did you guys ever watch The Shield?
Yeah, Vic Mackey and all that.
Yeah. So that to me, there's an architecture to that series, and half the series is about them sort of like leading up to the money train, and then once they steal the money train, it's the fallout from that, and the money that they've stolen, and just everything is a repercussion, the second half of that event. Mm-hmm. And I kind of tried to do something similar with Chew, where Tony the sister dies literally halfway through the run, and almost everything that comes out of it character wise is is the result of what happens in 30.
I do. There's a moment with Tony where she bites basically everybody to figure out what's going to happen in their future and everything. The first time she bites Premiere, she turns down his she turns him down and goes off. The second time, does she accept Premiere's like marriage proposal because she knows how much he loves her, or more so because she's not afraid of the commitment because she knows of her own impending death?
I think she sort of realized, how sort of true his love was, and to me, like, he's like the one character that I think, because everyone else is kind of a dick or a bastard in their own way. They're selfish, or they've got a bunch of hang-ups, and he is, to me, the legitimately, two-dimensionally kind of heroic person in the book. I guess Tony is to an extent, but she's got all these kind of like quirks to her. You know, she's got a good heart too. Mm-hmm. But you know, Paneer is the one like I said, just genuinely good person in Chew, I think.
I mean, to the extent where, you know, he's still like he's dedicating observatories and everything to her. I mean, he really did. I mean, every character that survives gets put through the ringer. Appleby loses Colby and turns into a Scimitar man, like a robotic cybernetic Scimitar man, and you know, one I forget what the character's name is. The guy that secretly is working with Mason that gets the lobster hand.
Oh, Caesar.
Caesar.
Yeah.
Everybody ends up.
Yeah, you know, I didn't get to there wasn't room, but Ed Caesar is the boss of the FDA. Like, you know, he gets mauled, but he actually sort of comes out okay. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Paneer does as, like, you know, director of, well, he's of the entire time, and I don't know how much it shows in 60, but I think Olive sort of is happier. You know, when you introduce her, she's this kind of sullen teenager, and she seems like she's becoming Tony. Mm-hmm. And she still has some grumpiness to her, but she doesn't have sort of the weight of his unhappiness, which you know, was sort of to give her this implied backstory where she's had kind of a rich, full life in 60.
Would you say that's partially because of Mason's influence teaching her to embrace her gifts, whereas Tony kind of is more reticent to do it for...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
the other part is her power is a little better. I mean, she can turn it off a little more, so her power has always been, you know, not quite as horrible as it is for Tony, just because she's got, I guess, more kind of inherent control of it.
What would you say? I mean, this is one of the big mysteries I think that happens in Chew is what exactly is Peter Piloff's deal? Because he's almost,
you know, I just wanted to keep it nebulous, and he is her collector. You know, he is the, you know, the bad guy who's been, you know, kind of vexing her entire career, mm-hmm. which at this point, you know, her career has been going on a few decades. You know, he's also a guy who may have had a crush on her since high school. And, you know, there's an argument to be made that maybe he's a little in love with her too. So, you know, that there's this, you know, weird, you know, story that's just kind of hinted at that you never really get in 60 because there's too much room. I mean, there's not enough room, and we're trying to wrap up Tony's story.
So Peter, in a lot, because he goes as far to like carve Olive into his arm. You know, in a lot of ways, I feel like Peter has become Olive's Joker if she's Batman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what the sort of the collector was to Tony. So yes.
In any ways, do you think Tony regrets not eating? You know, taking the collector's powers, leaving him to the rats. Whereas with Mason, of course, he's forced to eat all of Mason because Mason's eaten all these beats. But do you think Tony regrets not you know, consuming the collector?
No, I think he's so bullheaded that there's not a lot of you know, looking back with regret. You know, certainly when it comes to eating things.
Now, Jake had worked at a comic book store when this particular thing happened. I think one of the most innovative things that Chew ever did, and I think readers now won't get it because it wasn't collected that way, but when Chew was coming out month to month, you guys had that like time jump. How did that all come about?
Yep. Well, I write a sequence, and the honest to God issue, like I really enjoyed writing Tony the Sister. So I wrote this issue, and it was that far ahead. And, you know, the lazy part of me is like, well, you know, Rob's like, where's next month's script? Well, I don't know, but here's a script from 9 months from now. And it just seemed like a fun thing like this, like year later, and then get to the point. And, you know, it was also it was a writing exercise. It was a reward for floppy readers who were, you know, paying our bills. And so it was issue 17, 18, 27, 19, 20. But then when we collected it, you know, chronologically. So it's between 26 and 28. And people who came onto the book later, they have no idea. And there's a part of me that's really proud that they don't know, because it's seamless. Now, this wasn't exactly the plan, but it sounds really cool after the fact. We spotlighted the character who could see the future by jumping into the future.
I know that. Yes. Yeah.
Did I just blow your mind?
A little. Yeah.
That's funny. I remember when that happened at the comic shop, because there was like one person would write out the cards, another person would shift the books and work on the wall, and like one of the worst things you can do working in a comic shop is screw up the wall and making the slots for the next week's comics, because it's kind of like you're fucked, because the books are coming out, you can't reshift, and if you miss one, like the worst thing that would ever happen, your heart would drop.
Like in the A section.
Well, yeah, but like if you would like get to your end of the alphabet, which is Z, and yeah, I learned that at the comic shop, and you get to the end and there'd be like a blank space, and you'd go, oh fuck, because then you'd have to shift everything over. Well, anyway, long story short, when that happened with Chew, someone else had done the cards. I was putting the books out, and I saw 27, and then I was like, how the fuck did I just miss? I had like this mild heart attack of like, I fucked up this. My manager's going to kick my ass when he comes in on Tuesday, and he's like, where are the rest of these issues, Jake? So that was it. But it was always funny when people would come in and they were like, their minds were blown by
I
this
missed
kind of
10 months.
Yeah, I just woke up from a coma.
Well, I had one retailer who like was really busting my chops about it, because I guess it screwed up his his spreadsheet or whatever, the numeric way he does ordering. It's like, oh, come on, dude, give me a break.
No, it was a mild moment. The best thing
about 227 is we picked up enough readers that by the time we got to 27, we got really, we reprinted 27 with a new cover, and it was like getting a free issue's worth of money. It was fantastic.
Oh yeah, that was a funny week at the comic store.
Everyone just confused as all hell. But yeah, I always thought that was just like the coolest shit. Like that you would get that time jump. But now that you mention it, that's the first time we really see Tony's sister. And that's, oh my god.
Well, I mean, she's introduced a little bit. I mean, you meet her. She's she's on the phone, but you don't really. I mean, it's her solo issue. She's being the cop while Tony's knocked out. And it's funny because that's the one where we introduce psychedelic chogs, which are like and who would have thought that would become almost like an industry or other than Poyo, sort of our mascot. So now we've got, chogs of all different colors and, varieties and stuff like that. And they were doing these blind bag chogs where, oh, let's do a devil chog. Let's do a zombie chog. It's just nuts.
If Amiibo have taught me anything, it's that we live in a very collector-based society.
Oh, yeah. Pop figures, too.
Pop figures, too.
Oh, yeah.
Though there are moments where I look at my pop figures and I'm like, why the fuck do I have a Huckleberry Hound?
I have the weirdest, the weirdest spread of pop figures.
I'm waiting for the pop bubble to burst. I'm hoping we get Chew Pops.
Funko, you heard it here.
Oh, and speaking of pops, did you guys see the Judge Dredd pop one shot I did a month or so ago?
Yes, that was awesome. Yes, I have that. Yeah,
I mean, IDW called me up. They knew I liked Judge Dredd. They're like, hey, you want to write 3 Judge Dredd stories as like kid-friendly Warner Brother cartoon?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
That cover alone, just flipping through it, I was just like, this is awesome.
Since this thing is more of a conversation, I have to. And now that I remember the last time you were on, it had just been announced at Emerald City Comic Con, or it was just right before, and then we put out the episode the week of Emerald City. What was it like working on Judge Dredd versus Aliens versus Predator?
Oh, it was a lot of fun, but it was the lag was pretty disappointing by issues 3 and 4. I mean, there was a 8-month lag. So you lose a bit of enthusiasm, and I didn't even see the 4th issue until it showed up at the stands. So I mean, it was cool writing it. It'll be cool when it's a trade and you'll kind of forget all the it once it's water under the bridge.
Mhm.
But it wasn't the best experience just for scheduling reasons.
Well, I remember the Tech Jansen had run into some delays as well between like issues 1 and 2, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah, but again, that Tech Jansen's one of these things that, yeah, you remind me of that now, and yes, but now that it's been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years, you tend to forget about all that.
And now that Colbert's hosting like late night, I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a pretty cool thing to have on your shelf and on your resume.
now, I think one of the characters I always felt sorry for in Chew was the mayor or governor of I'm gonna fuck up the name of this island,
Oh, Yamapalu.
Yeah, Yamapalu. Because in his heart of hearts, the mayor just wants his island nation to like thrive and be awesome, but because of obviously kidnapping people isn't the best way to go about it, but also being caught in the crossfire.
No, he was definitely one of the first tragic characters, I think.
Yeah, and
because he was killed by 9 or 10.
He dies at the end of the second arc. He comes face to face with the Collector, and he's like, "Well, fuck this," and like blows his like brains out. And I was just like, "Oh," because I think it's right after that you kind of learn how. Like, I think Tony tastes a bit of him and realizes that's right because his like brains get sprayed on Tony, and Tony tastes his blood.
Yep, exactly.
And you find out how much he actually like cared about about his people, and it was just like, oh, because up until that point he was just kind of like almost like a jokey, like put upon character.
Well, Chew did a lot of that. We introduced a lot of characters that played out as jokes and then let them slowly flesh out, and then you kind of realize these two-dimensional characters, by the end they're three-dimensional, and you understand their motivations and hopefully feel a thing or two for them. I always thought I was always kind of proud of Applebee's arc because he's this like horrible person and he never stops. But it's pretty clear that he actually, loved Colby and that, they were happy together.
Would you say Colby, loved Appleby as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think Colby is always kind of going to be a nut and a free spirit, but yeah, I do think so.
That's. I mean, it underscores the tragedy of it all, but that is nice that in his final however many years he got to, because it was always kind of presented as a relationship of convenience just to get Appleby off like Tony's back, and then later, he's hooking up with the head of the USDA.
Well, I guess I always kind of thought it started off as that, and then it slowly kind of became real to Colby. It was always probably real to Appleby, but it sort of became more real to Appleby because there's this point where in 44 where they're beat up and Colby or Appleby gets cut in half, and they reach out and they kind of like hold hands, and it looks like they're dying together.
Oh, during the
so there's
when they face the
issue
Collector.
44 when everyone goes to face the Collector except for Tony and they all get eradicated.
Yeah, just systematically literally ripped apart. Yeah. That was
which 44 is one of my very favorite issues. And I rip myself off. It's literally the same story as my book Stay Puffed, where I do this horrible thing and then I backtrack, and they're walking up and they're saying, "Oh, what's the worst that could happen?" And you already know.
What was it like when it came to scripting those action sequences? Because there's quite a bit of action in Chew. I mean, Mason, despite his size, is like a fucking kung fu master, and of course, Olive is, and all the sequences with Egg and everything, and of course the Collector fights. Was that something that was also kind of you let Rob run wild, or how tightly plotted were those?
Yeah, and he asked for that. He always wanted something that was like almost a full issue fight, and there's a part where as a writer you feel guilty because you're like, well, he kicks or he punches or he does, like, basically you say this is the effect it has, but you leave it to the artist because they can choreograph better. But I tend to write very punches, he punches back, he kicks, whatever, but 500 words on a panel description, and here I write it in 140 characters.
I mean, it's very. Either way, you guys like knocked it. I mean, kudos to Rob. We've been trying to get Rob
like that for my Batman books. I mean, I hate action sequences in general because I always feel like I'm cheating because I guess I feel like I'm not kind of earning my keep, and I'm making the artist do all. But on the other hand, the artists love that aspect of things.
Yeah. Let their imagination run wild and all that. One of the other things I noticed is you've got, I feel like with the exception of Jackie Brown and Death Proof, you guys basically had Tarantino homages for all the other Tarantino films. Was that something that was just like, Rob was like, this would be really fucking cool, or it's like, I want to do the Hateful Eight or something?
Well, actually, Rob resisted. When we came to issue 3, I wanted to do a Pulp Fiction cover because I had this Pulp Fiction idea, and the letterer designer in me wanted me to step up and have a little a cover that was mine, and Rob did not like the idea initially of off cover, something that wasn't completely original. And Rob's a guy who doesn't like to take shortcuts, and I think on some level he thought that was a shortcut. But we did we did the Pulp Fiction cover, and then it sold out, and we did a reprint which was Reservoir Chogs, and then it just kind of like issue 35, we're like, oh, what do? We wanted something special for San Diego, and I came up with the Destroy Savoy, and a Kill Bill cover seemed great. And then when we got to 55, Hateful Eight presented itself, ATE, which was just another pun you couldn't resist.
Sure. But of all the Tarantino films, would you call Pulp Fiction your favorite?
No, I've actually been rewatching them. I mean, I love Pulp Fiction, but it's hard for me to pick a favorite. I have really liked Hateful Eight lately, and I've liked Inglourious Bastards. I love Death Proof. The one movie that I think is his lesser movie is Jackie Brown. It doesn't have the sparkle of the dialogue that the others do. Mm-hmm. And I've only seen Django Unchained once. I need to see that again.
It's
that shootout at the end. Oh
set
my
to
God.
Kanye West.
It's like Sam Peckinpah 2.0.
Damn. But all right. Well,
but it was funny because I have a super fan in and we're friends. I send her swag. We know each other at this point. But she's sort of she's in LA, and she goes to hear different people talk. And before 55 was out, she's like, oh, I'm going to a reading of Tarantino, and I'm going to give him choose 13, 13, and 35 and get him to sign it. And we're like, oh, no, please don't do that. Because if a lawyer is standing by, it's one of those things where it's better to ask, forgiveness after than ask permission. Uh-huh. And we're like, we do not want to we don't want to alert him to the fact we're doing this Hateful Eight thing and have it shut down. So, please don't show it to him.
Well, he's always over at co-owns the new Beverly out there. I always wanted to, every time in Los Angeles, I'm always like, maybe he'll be there, and he's never actually there, but I always hope.
That's how it works.
But
one of these days.
Yeah. He was promoting the Hateful Eight at San Diego, 2 years ago, which was the first year I had ever done San Diego. And I was like, maybe. And obviously, I mean, as history shows, that
didn't happen.
That never happens. But
no.
I'm trying to think who's the most famous person we've seen in San Diego. Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
That would probably be that would be it. Yeah.
Pretty famous.
But with the with Chew, the way Chew ends with Tony killing the lead chicken man, I mean, is humanity fucked? Because we've already seen they can blow up planets. Is that? I mean, it just ends on such a cliffhanger right there.
Okay, let's put this to you guys first. And what do you guys think happens?
I like to think we get a humanity versus, like, it's like Planet of the Apes,
Yes.
but the apes are chickens.
Yes.
Because I think that would be awesome. And one, I really like the Planet of the Apes, and two, I like to think that like characters like Olive and everybody, I guess really just Olive, like survive to see their old age rather than planet Earth getting like eradicated, like Amelia had seen so many times.
Yeah. See, I'd almost rather. I know my answer, but I'd almost rather not give it because it almost sort of becomes canon that way. And I really wanted. I want you to choose what happens, what's next. Until I come back with Chew 3, or Chew 2, 10 years from now or whenever. But I really wanted sort of almost a Sopranos-esque ending where you could where you could interpret it the way you want to.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And
yeah,
I knew going into it about 20% of the audience would hate the ending because a lot of people want something, more structured, and they want the writer to say this is how it did. And that's about right. Maybe about 1 out of 5, maybe less, certainly not more. And I'm fine with that.
Was that the immediate reaction, like on your Twitter and everything? As soon as like issue 60 hit the stands, you just people getting like, "What the hell, Layman?" Like over like that over that.
Yeah,
ending?
but generally in a positive way. And there were a few, negative reviews after the fact, and the people who hated it always referred to the ending as a punchline. They're like, all this for a punchline. It's like, well, if you only see it as a punchline, I could see you could be unsatisfied. And maybe it is a punchline, but it certainly at least tries to.
Yeah. Well, looking back on, all these years of Chew, I guess like since its inception, what would you say about the series?
I think it got a little too silly between in maybe the last fourth. I think I got a little lazy with the cases because the cases were never a priority, and I wonder if they should have been more clever instead of less. Oh, here's a guy this issue. But to me, that was never like if I look at it critically and it's like, what don't I like? There is a part of me that worries that part got a little too silly. But on the other hand, all this horrible stuff was happening to the characters, and I felt like I needed to offset it. So I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong. I'm really happy with the way it ended. It ended the way it was supposed to.
As it was always intended. I mean, it's kind of it's been
and everything I up to that moment, and I think it's perfectly in character for pretty much everybody, but especially Tony.
I'm gonna kind of like reveal myself a bit. I had written a 25th anniversary special for Image earlier this year, and so I'm going through all these like books, like tracing. And again, I'm not trying to get my nose browner than it usually is, but Chew in a lot of ways really does kind of kick off the Image renaissance. Like, you could argue it happens with The Walking Dead, but The Walking Dead goes on for years before the rest of the publishing line catches up. Not that long after Chew is when you start to see, stuff like Saga or any, Wicked and Divine. So I really do, as a reader and as a fan, really credit Chew for kind of helping Image find its own voice as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that from a kind of from a selfish perspective. If Image would have found Image sooner, we would have made a lot more money. Because we never. I mean, we do great in trade and worldwide, but as floppies, I don't think we ever got above like 15K, except maybe for Poyo specials or Chew Revival. Whereas you look at the Remender books or Sex Criminal. they're selling double what Chew did in floppies, and it's because Image is red hot now.
Yeah.
That being said, Chew is way more successful than we ever thought it would be, or I dreamed it would be. So I have got no reason to complain, if that sounded like a complaint.
Not at all. Not at all. It all had to start somewhere. You were the spark, John. You were the spark. But, John, this is something we ask everybody that comes on the show. What are you currently geeking out over?
Oh, this is so sad. I bet you I'm going to give you the exact same answer I gave you a year and a half ago. Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare 2.
Oh, you
it's
relapsed.
all I do.
You relapsed. I thought you kicked the habit.
Oh, because I had for about 3 weeks, hadn't I? I actually quit for. No, I'm back. I'm back with. I can't. I have unlocked every character. I am now max leveling every. I don't understand why it's not the most popular shooter in the history of mankind. It's just the best. But I read comics, I watch TV, I watch movies. I was into Legos really heavily, and then sort of the Chinese knockoffs have kicked that, because if I can get 8 superheroes for $8.99, I don't need to pay $50 for a set to get Doctor Doom. Which that has saved me a lot of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, video games, Plants vs. Zombies primarily.
What is it about?
And one of these days Oh, go ahead.
What is it about Plants vs. Zombies?
Well, it's a shooter with classes, kind of like, I guess, Star Wars Battlefront, but I find that really boring. And there's a lot of like really cool unlockables, and you can customize your character, and it's got a really good sense of humor to it. So really, at the end of the day, after working, and I haven't been working that hard, in this post-Chew year, I'll settle down for a good hour and a half, 2 hours of just killing people online, and I just love it.
You started playing the game again as soon as you got back from DC, didn't you?
Pretty much, yeah. But yeah, I quit it after playing it straight for about a year and a half, maybe. I weeks, which I think I needed to. But yeah, now I'm back.
Fair enough. So now that we're almost a year post-Chew, is there anything that you have in the works that you can talk about?
Yeah, I've got my next big, because I'm a guy who really can only concentrate on one big thing at a time. And, I'm doing something with Sam Keith right now, Eleanor and the Egret for Aftershock. And it's just a 5-issue thing. And then Sam and I actually have our next project and our next project. Rob and I are trying to figure out what we want to do next, but I know as soon as I start delivering Rob something, then it becomes give him a script every 30 days, and I don't necessarily want back on that treadmill just yet. But my next book is approved, and 6 issues are written. It's just moving slow, but it'll come out in 2018, and it will be in my mind my follow-up to Chew. And it's sci-fi horror.
Would you say so? Does it lean into any kind of comedic element at all? Or are you going full tilt boogie on that like alien-esque horror?
I pitched it, referencing Event Horizon a lot and giving it that kind of horror vibe. And then as I get deeper into it, it starts getting weird, funny, and it'll never be as goofy as Chew. But I can't help but add, a little bit of I guess subversive humor and stuff just for my own amusement. So, there was by issue 4, it's a little more weird than it is horror, even though the horrific elements are in it every issue. So it's more like sci-fi / horror / Layman weird.
So 2018 is the Laymanisance.
Yeah. I didn't want to get into writing right away, and so like the first 6 months after Chew was done, I didn't do much at all except work out. And I would go to the gym and I would listen to Nine Inch Nails. I lost 35 pounds and got like more in shape than I'd kind of really ever been. And then I've just slowly been, working back into the work groove. But, I kind of want, I guess, a victory lap and just not work as hard for a while. Spend more time with the kid, get healthy, watch more movie, all the stuff I couldn't do because I was tied into, all these books. But there is a reality. You got to pay rent. So, there are this next book. I've already got 6 issues in the can, and I'm working on issues 7 and 8 at the same time. Along with various pitches.
I feel like at one point you were working on what? Chew, Detective Comics, and like maybe Batman,
Mars
Attacks, like all, and a little Batman Eternal.
Yeah, there was a point where I definitely oversaturated. I had to pull back. DC kept dazzling me with all this, like, I guess, shiny objects. You want to write a Catwoman issue? You want to write an annual? Want to write a villains book? And it was a lot of fun, but they're falling behind on Chew, and I didn't want to kill my cash cow and the thing that's mine. So my thought will always be there, and I can come back. That being said, DC hasn't expressed a lot of interest in me coming back since I left them voluntarily.
Jeff Johns, if you're listening to this, we got Josh Williamson. We'll anyway. So, well,
no, I went to both the big two after Chew ended, and it's like, hey, you guys want the Chew team to do a Deadpool or a Plastic Man or this and this, and crickets. So, a big, air quote hit indie book that gets Eisners and all this other shit doesn't necessarily translate into big two interest, which is fine because my goal is not to write a million superhero books. I had that in front of me and I walked away from it, and that was very telling.
Yeah. Well, and
that being said, I wouldn't mind writing a little Batman again.
Sure. Well, always kind of get back into Gothtopia and everything. So,
yeah. No, well, part of the problem was my editor my editors moved on, and now there's an entirely new regime who don't know me from Adam. Hey, I'm the guy who wrote Batman 2 years before you guys came on. Oh great, we've got our own people now.
Not to mention, I feel like DC's putting out less books, and they're very. I don't know what the culture is like in the Rebirth era, but there has definitely been an editorial shift.
Well, there always is. I mean, that's the thing about comics and Big Two especially is nothing ever stays the same. And I'm lucky that I was able to write. I got 3 nice detective hardcovers, and I was there for 3 issues and that. So it was a good experience.
And you're going to be.
And I know what will happen is this next book. This next book will come out. Knock wood, it will do well and get a bunch of attention, and then suddenly I'll get Big Two offers, and I'll be like, "Where were you that year I was unemployed?" And knocking at your door. But that's just the nature of comics.
Yeah. Well, and you're going to be at San Diego. What made you change your mind on San Diego this year?
I've gone for 26 years in a row. I had a ride. I got a place to stay. I got a badge. So there's nothing. There's no reason not to go except for the money I will spend on food and booze. And after going for 26 years in a row, saying this will be the year I won't, but it's like the end of the Killing Joke. You just can't stop once you're that far in.
Yeah, it's like The Godfather. Just when you think you're out.
Yep.
Well, Jake and I will be.
I'll be there.
Yeah. Jake and I will be working the image booth on that one. So
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, feel free.
And I have grown to love the CBLDF party on Thursday nights, which is usually the image party as well. And I used to hate it because it was the same people year after year. And now over the years, I've grown to love it because it's the same people every year. San Diego has gotten so balkanized. It used to be people hung out at the Hyatt, but now it's so big. It's all CBLDF party is the one kind of place you can see everybody, and it's real nice.
We'll be at
and there's
that
no
one
Hollywood.
Yeah. I'll be at that one. I'll try to be on my best behavior compared to last year's CBDLDF party.
Yeah.
Oh, don't be on your best. No one's asking for that.
I don't think I can pull
Better.
I don't think I can pull the same stunts I did with you in DC last month, but I'll be around. Buy you around. John.
we shall. I'm up for that challenge.
Okay, deal. Well, all right. Well, John, thanks again for coming on, and again, all 12 volumes of Chew, or help the creators out. Get those Omnivore editions or the Smorgasbord editions if you're more inclined.
Yeah, there's ways to buy it. It's digital and it's in 11 languages. So it's all over the place.
Mm-hmm. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday, and you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.